important is it to keep our word? In the Chinese language, when you look at a person standing by their words, there's a figure in the actual calligraphy where a man is standing by his word. Does anyone ever recall hearing the expression, a man's word is his bond? Where handshakes meant something, where promises made were to be kept. I remember hearing George McGovern last summer telling a great story when he was talking about the life of Lincoln, about Abraham Lincoln returning some books that he had borrowed from somebody. He thought he had left them at the house where they belonged, but he had mistakenly brought them back in his bag with him. And he walked back 5 miles to return the books to the people he had borrowed them from. Lincoln's word was important to him. How important is it that we stand by our words? We read this story from Genesis because it's hard to believe a story like this is in the Bible. We could have a lot of fun unpacking this. Sometimes I wish that when I'm preaching the snow would hit and we'd just be stuck here for a while and I could just sit and talk. But the truth of the matter is, this story is interesting because Jacob was known, in fact his name meant deceiver, manipulator. And he had a reputation when he left home for having that kind of character flaw. Here he's taking his trip, he's looking for where he's going to live, and he comes upon his uncle's property, and there they're grazing sheep. There was an agricultural time. Wendell Berry says the word culture is in agriculture. Did you know that in the year 1900, 97% of America lived on a farm, and in 2000, 3% or less did? It was a farming culture, sheep herding. So Jacob comes on and he needs to water his flocks, and he sees these people gathered, and he discovers he's on his uncle's property. And then Rachel walks in, herding her father's flocks, ready to water them. And I guess we could say it was love at first sight. What Nancy read this morning was that she was stunningly beautiful. I remember one time when I was teaching in the high school, there was a couple in the hall. It was during break. Now, I taught at the far end of the building. Janine knows where I taught. Some of you know I was at the very end of the building. And couples would migrate there during breaks. And we had as faculty, we had the god-awful task of keeping everybody separated. Well, how's that to deal with? You got 3 minutes to run to the bathroom between classes, and you have to break up the kissing matches. And so I remember I was going down the hall one day, and there were 2 people who were intertwined, shall we say, and just going at it. Now, I was not in the mood for this to start with. I was trying to get to the bathroom and do some errand, all in 3 minutes. And I stopped and I said, and I looked at them and I said, I hope. Now they're going at it while I'm talking to them. I hope And they stopped and looked at me as though I had two heads. And I said, would you please get out of here? Do you really want me to write this up and take it to Mrs. Wendo down at the office? Just go. Do it somewhere else. Not my home. Well, I suppose Jacob, when he saw Rachel, who was stunningly beautiful, the story says he went up and he kissed her. Now, I'm supposing that this was probably not a romantic kiss, but it was a kiss of greeting. But he certainly was moved, love at first sight. And he wanted her. He went back to Laban, and Laban put out the welcome wagon, hospitality, red carpet, stay here, live with us. And Jacob began working for nothing. But he had his eye on Rachel. Some of you will remember the time when somebody had their eye on you. And if they still love you, I hope they still have their eye on you. For a month, he works for nothing. And finally, Laban, being smitten a little bit with conscience, said, well, I ought to pay you if you're going to work here. What do you want? What do you think is a fair wage? And Jacob said, I want to marry Rachel. Jacob says, no problem. We just soon have her marry somebody as marry somebody from away. You see, even in the Old Testament, they had this attitude about people from away, didn't they? In the Bible. I suppose some of us would just say, well, the Bible says it's okay to say people from away should marry one of us. You can just do anything with the Bible. You need to come to my Wednesday Bible class. We'll talk about that further. But here we are. Jacob agrees to work so that he may marry Rachel after 7 years. Now we have to understand that this was a different culture, and it was a marriage by arrangement, and there were terms of agreement in marriage. It was also very common for people to marry cousins or people of close familial ties. And so, did you notice in the reading, the Bible said the 7 years seemed like a few days. Oh, remember when you fell in love and you had limited time and it just flew by. When you spend time on something that you really love, the time flies. With a relationship or a vocation or a job that you have, something you really love, maybe it's music, but the time flies. And as the cliche goes, time flies when you're having fun. Well, it must have been fun for Jacob, because even though he worked, his work was as play. And his time flew.